AITA for leaving my fiancée when she asked to date her ex one last time. I met Jessica a little over 2 years ago. When we started dating, we were the same age, and from the beginning, it seemed like we were both looking for very similar things in life. Our relationship didn't start in a dramatic or impulsive way. Rather, it was the exact opposite, calm, natural, as if the pieces had just fallen into place on their own. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party. Honestly, that day I didn't really want to go. I had been stuck in a routine of work and home for several weeks, so in the end, I decided to attend just for a change of scenery. Jessica was there talking with a small group of people. She wasn't the loudest person at the party, but she didn't go unnoticed either. She had a calm and confident way of expressing herself. And something that caught my attention was that she really listened when someone spoke. She didn't just wait for her turn to answer. She seemed genuinely interested in what others were saying. We ended up talking for a good part of the night. At first, we talked about simple things like work, music, movies, and the typical conversations that come up when you meet someone for the first time. But as the hours passed, the chat started to get a bit deeper. We started talking about goals, plans for the future, and how we imagined our lives playing out. It was at that moment when I heard something that I would remember many times later. Jessica said her biggest dream in life was to have a large family. She didn't mention it like someone making a passing comment. On the contrary, she explained it in quite a bit of detail. She shared that she wanted to get married, have a few kids, live in a nice house in the suburbs, and build a stable home. She spoke about all of this with a conviction that surprised me, and to be honest, many of those ideas were also in my head. Maybe I didn't say it with the same enthusiasm as her, but I had always imagined something similar. A solid relationship, kids someday, and a quiet home after years of working. When we finished that conversation, I remember thinking it was unusual to find someone who had such a similar outlook on life. At the end of the night, we exchanged numbers and started dating a few weeks later. Our relationship wasn't perfect, of course, but for a long time, it was pretty good. We weren't one of those couples who spend all their time arguing or creating unnecessary drama. We had disagreements like any couple, but nothing that seemed truly serious. Jessica was a very organized person. She always had plans in mind, trips she wanted to take, goals at her marketing job, and even very clear ideas about how she pictured her life in 5 or 10 years. She often brought up the topic of marriage, and she didn't do it vaguely or theoretically. She said it directly. For example, she would mention things like wanting to get married before turning 30, or she would also say that she didn't want just one child, but at least 3. At first, I found it amusing to hear her speak with such certainty about those kinds of things, but over time, that topic became completely normal in our conversations. We even joked about it. She would say that someday we would live in a noisy house with kids running everywhere. I would reply that I'd probably have to soundproof the walls in my home office if I wanted to get any work done. Those kinds of jokes. As the months went by, our relationship started to get more serious. Around the 6-month mark, I met her family. They seemed like nice people, and everything flowed quite well. I had no problems with any of them, and I remember on one occasion her mother told me that Jessica seemed happier and more grounded since she had been with me. I also introduced her to my family. My parents welcomed her, and my friends seemed to get along with her. At that time, honestly, I didn't see any red flags that would make me think something was wrong, nothing that raised suspicions. There was one thing I did know from the beginning. Jessica had been in a long-term relationship before meeting me. She had been with someone for several years, and that relationship had ended shortly before we met. I don't remember exactly how much time had passed between one relationship and the other, but I did know that this ex-boyfriend had been someone important in her life. Even so, I never saw it as a problem. Jessica explained that the relationship had ended because it simply wasn't working anymore. According to her, there were too many differences, frequent arguments, and their life paths no longer aligned. Nothing out of the ordinary. As time passed, that topic stopped coming up in our conversations, and our relationship kept moving forward normally. We celebrated our first anniversary with a simple dinner at a nice Italian restaurant downtown. It wasn't anything over the top, but it was a lovely night. By that point, I was already quite clear about my feelings for her. It wasn't an impulsive emotion or a passing phase. It was more of a feeling of stability, as if I were with the right person. During our second year together, things got even more serious. We started talking about the possibility of moving in together. We didn't do it right away because we both had apartment leases that hadn't ended yet, but the idea was already on the table. Jessica also started mentioning marriage more frequently. She said she would like a simple but beautiful wedding. Nothing too luxurious, but something special and meaningful. Sometimes we even talked about possible honeymoon destinations. There was one place that constantly came up in those conversations: Punta Cana. Jessica had always wanted to travel there. It wasn't a casual comment made just once. She mentioned it quite often. She said she loved the beaches there, the color of the water, and the peaceful vibe it seemed to have. She had seen many pictures online and kept repeating that someday she wanted to visit. I had never traveled there, but little by little, the idea also began to stick in my head. The months kept passing, and our relationship seemed to be heading exactly where we had imagined from the start. That was when I seriously started thinking about marriage. It wasn't a sudden decision. I had been mulling it over for several months. I thought about our relationship, how well we worked together, and the goals we shared. Everything seemed to indicate that this was the logical next step. Besides, our second anniversary was approaching, and I wanted to do something truly special, something we would both remember for a long time. That was when I remembered all the times Jessica had talked about Punta Cana. The idea slowly began to form in my mind. A special trip for our anniversary, and if everything went as I hoped, a marriage proposal. The problem was that this trip wasn't exactly cheap, at least not for me. I work as a project manager where the salary is stable, but it doesn't allow for big expenses without careful planning. So I made a decision. I started saving. For several months, I cut out many unnecessary expenses. I stopped ordering takeout for lunch, made coffee at home instead of buying it, postponed getting a new laptop, and gradually put money away. Every dollar saved was part of the plan. If everything went well, that trip would be the beginning of a new chapter for both of us. I didn't tell Jessica anything about what I was planning. I wanted it to be a complete surprise. After several months of saving money and watching every expense, I finally managed to gather enough to make it happen. So I booked the trip through a travel agency. When I finally told her we were going to Punta Cana to celebrate our anniversary, her reaction was exactly what I had pictured. First, she stayed silent for a few seconds, as if she needed to confirm she had heard correctly. Then she started smiling in a way that I still remember perfectly. "Are you serious?" she asked immediately. Then she hugged me tightly. She kept repeating that she had always wanted to see that place. During the weeks leading up to the trip, she was excited almost all the time. She spent hours looking at pictures of the resort, talking about the beaches, the water, the weather, and also planning what outfits to pack. I watched her in those moments and thought I had made the right choice. Besides the trip, I also bought the ring. I didn't choose anything overly expensive, but it was an elegant and beautiful solitaire diamond ring. I spent quite a bit of time inside a local jewelry store comparing different options until I found one that felt perfect for her. While doing all that, I often imagined what the proposal moment would be like. Finally, the day of the trip arrived. Punta Cana turned out to be even more stunning than I expected. The beaches were massive, the sand was white, and the water was incredibly clear. It was the kind of place many couples traveled to specifically to celebrate major life milestones. We spent the first few days just enjoying the location. We walked along the beach, tried local food, and visited some tourist spots. Jessica seemed genuinely happy, very happy, and seeing her like that only made me feel even more certain about what I was about to do. I had everything planned out. The proposal would happen on the exact night of our anniversary. I had made a reservation for dinner near the beach, at a quiet restaurant where you could clearly hear the sound of the ocean. Everything seemed perfect. During dinner, we chatted like always. We talked about normal things, the places we had visited, and how beautiful the location was. Nothing weird, nothing that made me suspect what was about to happen. After dinner, we went for a walk on the beach. There were very few people around. Most tourists were at their hotels or other restaurants. The atmosphere was peaceful, almost silent, and the waves could be heard in the distance. At that moment, I decided the time had come. I stopped walking. Jessica looked at me curiously, as if wondering what was going on. I took a deep breath, pulled the small box with the ring from my pocket, and got down on one knee in front of her. I clearly remember the look on her face in that instant. At first, she seemed surprised, but that surprise didn't last long. I started telling her everything I had been thinking about for months. I talked to her about our relationship, about how important those 2 years had been for me. I told her they had been the most stable and happy years of my life. I also told her that I saw her as my partner for the future and that I wanted to build the family we had talked about so many times. Then I opened the box with the ring and asked the question, "Will you marry me?" For several seconds, she didn't answer at all. She just stared at me. But her expression began to change. She didn't look excited. She looked uncomfortable. Finally, she said something I never imagined hearing in that moment. "I'm not ready to get married." At first, I thought she was simply nervous. I slowly stood up and asked her what exactly she meant by that. After all, for 2 years she herself had talked about marriage many times. But Jessica avoided looking at me directly. Then she said something I still find hard to believe I heard. "I do want to get married," she said. "But I always thought I would marry my ex, not you." I felt as if the ground had vanished beneath my feet. I stayed completely silent, trying to understand what I had just heard. Before I could react, she kept talking, and what she said next was even worse. She looked at me with a calmness that I found almost incomprehensible and said, "I want to try one last time with my ex-boyfriend, and if it doesn't work out, then I will come back to you." She said it with a naturalness that left me completely paralyzed. For several seconds, I didn't know what to say. My mind was trying to find some logical explanation, but nothing made sense. Finally, I asked her the only question that seemed reasonable to me at the time. "Why are you telling me this now?" My voice sounded much calmer than I actually felt. "Why didn't you break up with me sooner and try things with him back then?" Jessica sighed as if she were explaining something simple. "Because he texted me a week ago." I immediately felt a knot in my stomach. She replied with total ease. "When he reached out, I felt things again." She said it just like that, without any drama, as if she were remembering a song she liked. Then she added, "He told me he regrets how things ended between us. He thinks maybe we were too young when we broke up, and that perhaps we could still try again." I looked at her without saying a word. Then she added another sentence that left me even more confused. "I thought maybe I should give him one last chance." At that moment, I felt something very strange. It wasn't just pain, it was also disbelief. So I asked her directly, "And where do I fit in all of this?" She just shrugged a little. "I don't want to lose you either." I remember staring at her when she said that. Then she went on explaining her idea as if it were something entirely reasonable. "That is why I told you what I did. I want to try one last time with him, and if it doesn't work out, then I will come back to you." In that instant, I felt something inside me break, but there was no dramatic scene. I didn't yell, I didn't argue. I simply closed the ring box, put it in my pocket, and looked at her for a few more seconds. Then I said something very simple. "I understand." Jessica seemed confused by my reaction. "Is that all you're going to say?" I didn't answer. I just turned around and started walking. I heard her say my name a couple of times, but I didn't stop. I went back to the hotel in complete silence. That night, I barely slept. I spent hours sitting on the bed, staring at the ceiling of the room and trying to understand how my life had reached that point. The next morning, I made a decision. I was not going to stay in that place any longer. I went online, changed my flight, and booked the first one back home. When Jessica found out I was leaving, she tried to talk to me, but I had nothing left to say. There was nothing to discuss. Before I left for the airport, she met me with my suitcase in the hotel lobby. "Mark," she started to say, but I cut her off. "You don't need to say anything else." After that, I left. During the flight back, I could barely think. I felt a mix of emotions that was hard to describe. Pain, humiliation, anger, sadness, all at the same time. When I finally got back to my apartment, I saw that I had several messages on my phone. One of them was from Jessica. It was quite long. I opened it out of pure curiosity. The message said something like this: "Mark, I know all of this happened very fast, and I probably hurt you a lot, but I want you to know that you are a great man. You truly are. If things with my ex don't work out, I will come back to you. I promise. I love you." I read that message several times in a row. Even so, I didn't reply. The truth is, I had absolutely nothing to say to her, so I decided to ignore it completely. The 2 months that followed were pretty weird. I'm not going to pretend I was okay. In reality, I felt awful. And it wasn't just because of the breakup. What really got to me was how everything had gone down. Every time someone asked me about Jessica, the conversation turned awkward. My friends knew I had traveled with the intention of proposing. So when I came back alone, The questions inevitably started. What happened with the proposal? Where is Jessica? Did everything go well? At first, I tried to avoid the details, but eventually, I ended up telling them what had actually happened, and almost everyone's reaction was the same. They didn't believe me. They thought I was exaggerating or that I had misunderstood the situation. Once, a friend told me, "That sounds too absurd. Nobody would say something like that." But yes, someone had said it. Jessica had said it. During those 2 months, I tried to move on with my life as normally as possible. I focused on work, went out with friends when I could, and tried to keep my mind busy so I wouldn't overthink. Still, there were times when the memories rushed back. The trip, the beach, the moment I knelt in front of her, and above all, the words I heard afterward. 2 months after all that, something happened that I honestly didn't expect. It was a normal afternoon. I was at home watching a baseball game when someone knocked on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, I froze completely. Jessica was standing in front of me. She had a small suitcase and was smiling. "Babe," she said. At that moment, I felt a strange mix of surprise and annoyance. I came back, just like I promised. I looked at her without saying anything. She kept talking. "It didn't work out with my ex, but that doesn't matter anymore. I realized that you're the person I want to be with." There were a few seconds of silence. I was still trying to process what was happening, but Jessica seemed fully convinced that everything she was saying made sense. "We can fix things," she said. "I know I hurt you, but I'm here now." I stared at her for a few seconds and then said the first thing that came to mind. "Jessica, you are the most foolish person I have ever met." Her expression changed instantly. "Don't call me that," she replied with a trembling voice. I shook my head. "You traded a man who was willing to give you everything for some high school fantasy." Her eyes started welling up with tears. "It wasn't like that," she said. "Then explain to me how it was." She started crying. "I made a mistake," she admitted. "But I'm here now. That's what matters." I looked at her in disbelief. "Did you really think it was going to work like this?" "Just give me another chance," she said through tears. I took a deep breath before replying. "Did you honestly believe that with a few tears and an apology, I was going to welcome you back with open arms?" She didn't say anything. "I want you to leave," I continued. "I can't believe you'd even try this." Her crying became even heavier. "Mark, please." But for me, that conversation was already over. I slammed the door shut, and that was the last time I saw her in person. In the weeks that followed, I noticed something curious. Jessica started posting pretty weird things on her social media. Sad memes, quotes about regret, and images with text talking about losing the right person. I didn't react to any of it. I didn't comment. I didn't like anything. One day, she sent me another message. It said something like, "Life has no meaning without you." I read it and replied with something very simple. "Get a hobby and leave me alone." After that message, I didn't receive anything else. And as far as I know, that was the last contact we had. If I'm being honest, there are still moments when I remember everything that happened, and it seems completely absurd to me. For 2 years, I was convinced I was building a life with someone. In the end, I discovered that to this person, I was nothing more than a backup plan. I don't know what happened with her ex. I also don't know what became of Jessica after all that. The only thing I am sure of is that the story ended there, and after everything that went down, I do not have the slightest intention of ever seeing her again. Comment. I want to take a moment to talk about something we all face at some point, the painful reality of misplaced trust. Walking away from someone you love is never an easy choice, but sometimes it is the highest form of self-respect you can practice. You should never accept being treated as an option or a backup plan in someone else's life. Your time, your heart, and your commitment are incredibly valuable gifts that deserve to be met with equal certainty. When a relationship breaks your trust, choosing peace over a chaotic cycle of apologies is a powerful step toward healing. It takes a lot of courage to draw a hard line and protect your mental well-being instead of holding onto a comforting illusion. We cannot control how others treat us, but we absolutely control what we are willing to accept. Keep your heart open to kindness, but never forget to build strong boundaries to keep yourself safe. I hope you always remember your true worth and never settle for anything less than a love that chooses you first. Let me know your thoughts about setting boundaries in the comments below, and please take good care of yourselves. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.